With the arrest the guy.
Another video in Times Square. They break through the barricade, they beat up a Jewish guy, and this is the headline.
What's the headline?
Pro-Israel demonstrators clash with counter-protesters in Times Square.
Terrible. See, who do they write first? The pro-Israel demonstrators, you understand?
Yeah, but it was nothing to just say broke through the barricade.
Okay. Okay, good morning, everybody. Everybody knows we're on. Okay. Good morning. Okay, yesterday we ended the Gemara that we said about the man who said the blessing, blessed be the Mori the Haipita, right? He gave Hashem, who's the master of that bread, and we said that could count for one of the brachot, the first bracha of the Birkat Hamazon, right? He did not do the proper version of the bracha. He did not do a proper translation of the bracha, yet he gets credit for the first bracha of Birkat Hamazon, even though you didn't say it in the Hebrew text, even though you didn't say the proper text. But listen, he said enough, because he did say Baruch Rachmana the Haipita. He did mention Hashem, God, and he did mention Baruch Rachmana the Haipita, and that's sufficient that he has the name of Hashem included in the bracha, and therefore he would get credit for that. That's what we said yesterday. Now, in the Shulchan Aruch, it quotes this halacha. Kuf Pei Zayin Sif Aleph, it says, if a person said, instead of saying the first bracha, Birkat Hazon, in the Birkat Hamazon, right? Hazon es Olam, right? Hazon es Hakol. A person says, blessed be the merciful one, Malka, the king, because you have to also say Malchut. You may say a bracha has to contain the idea of Melech. We'll see that. Morei, the ruler, the master of the Haipita, of that bread, Yatza. You fulfill your obligation if you say that very short version. A one-line statement could technically cover your first bracha of the Birkat Hamazon. That's not the way you're supposed to do it, but if you went ahead and you just said, we welcome Morris Franco, and you go ahead and you say, Brich Rachmana de Haipita, you hear that, Morris? Person says, Brich Rachmana de Haipita, he gets credit. So the Chafetz Chaim writes, even though you did not say the proper text that the rabbis instituted that you're supposed to say in Hebrew, nevertheless, you fulfill your obligation, b'di'eved, since you mentioned Hashem's name, which is known as Rachmana, and you mention Malchut, so you have God's name, you have Malchut, so there's a few things in order that a bracha, to get credit for bracha, Hashem's name, Malchut, also you need Malchut, we're going to see more about that, if to mention God's kingship, and also you spoke about the idea that God is the one who provides the bread. Now, he says, L'chatchila, but this is only b'di'eved, but everybody agrees that l'chatchila, you're not supposed to change the text that the rabbis instituted how to say the bracha. Like the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tefillah, in Hilchos Kriyat Shema, Hilchos Brachot. Now, what about children? So the Chafetz Chaim says, the children, you could train the children to say a short version of the Birkat Hamazon. Children who are not yet, it's too much for them to say the whole Birkat Hamazon. You could train them this type of short version. If you say one line for the first bracha, and then you also teach them for each bracha a short line from each bracha of the Birkat Hamazon, until they're educated enough that they're able to recite the whole Birkat Hamazon properly. That is the way the Chafetz Chaim writes. The problem is there are some people that might say this short version even when they get older. which is not acceptable, so on and so forth. We're only talking about children that are very young, that are not capable of going ahead and doing the whole full Birkat Hamazon. Therefore, maybe you would have for children. There's some people that had such a thing for children, a mini version of Birkat Hamazon for children until they're capable of doing the whole thing properly. Now, the other thing that we said, that the Gemara said that quoted the Mishnah in Sota, that Birkat Hamazon and Tfilah, Kriya Shema are able to be technically said b'chol lashon, in any language, right? You could technically say the Amidah, you could say the Shema, you could say the Birkat Hamazon. And in the Shulchan Aruch, in Hilchos Kriya Shema, he says you could read the Shema b'chol lashon. You could read Shema in any language. And the Chafetz Chaim says, Hu adin davening, Birkat Hamazon, Kiddush, Birchas HaMitzvos, HaPeiros, Hallel, all those things technically could be done, many of those things could be done in any language. He says, but that's Mitzad Hadin. But the best way to go is only Lashon HaKodesh. It's in the Hebrew. That's what the Bach says. And then he continues and he says, in our days, Af Mitzad Hadin, even the law has changed. Why? Even though you learned this Gemara, the Mishnah that says you could say Shema in any language and Birkat Hamazon in any language, which means even Lechatchila you could do it, except it's maybe it's the best level in Hebrew, but you could even Lechatchila do it the other way. But today, we should not even allow the person to say the Shema in English. Why? Because there's many words that we do not know how to translate properly. Like he says, the word vishinantam levanecha. How do you translate vishinantam levanecha? There's many translations. One means to teach. One means to teach the students that they should be very sharp, or you should be very sharp. And there are many words in the Shema that we do not have exact translation. The word et. How do you translate the word et? Or the totafot, right? We're talking about the tefillin, totafot. And so therefore, when you read it in Hebrew, or similarly when you pray in Hebrew, or when you say Birkat Hamazon, or Kiddush, or other brachot, even if you don't understand the language, you get credit. When you read in other languages but Hebrew, you must understand. If a guy does not understand French, but he knows how to read French, you won't get credit. You have to understand it. So similarly, if you go ahead and if you're saying it not in the right language and you're not saying it, you're not translating it properly, you will not get credit. So therefore, he says, therefore we should stick to the Hebrew. And he says, we know the first pasuk. If you don't know the first pasuk in the Shema, if you don't understand the first pasuk, even if you say it in Hebrew, you don't get credit. So he says, it's not common that a Jewish person should not know the translation of the first pasuk of the Shema. Every Jew knows the basic translation of what Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad means. And we also find, by the way, that the first paragraph of the Amidah, is very key. The avot, to understand the translation. Okay, so that's the story with that, and that's why the importance of saying the Shema and everything in Hebrew. Okay, we're up to the Gemara Mem Amid Beis, 3 lines into the wide lines. Gufa, Amar Rav. You have it. 3 lines from the wide lines. So the Gemara said, Amar Rav, we're going back to what Rav said the following. Kol bracha she'ein bo askaras Hashem eina bracha. If you have any bracha that does not mention the name of Hashem in the bracha, you don't get credit. You didn't say the bracha. That means the guy goes ahead and he says, Baruch atah Elokeinu melech olam. He didn't say Hashem. He missed Hashem's name. Or you said a bracha in a different language, but you didn't mention Hashem in the bracha, then you do not get credit for the bracha. you have to do the bracha again. Kol bracha she'ein bo haskaras Hashem, ein a bracha. Rabbi Yochanan takes it to another level. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, kol bracha she'ein bo malchut. If you don't mention that Hashem is the king, the fact that you mentioned God's name, but if you did not connect that God is the king of the world, or is the king, we'll have to see more about that. If you don't mention malchut, ain't no bracha. That's not a bracha. It's also not a bracha. You have to have both Hashem's name and also that he's the king. So the Gemara continues, and the Gemara says, Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Kavatei de Rav Mistafra. He says that the opinion of Rav seems to be more logical. Rav, who only requires you to say the name Hashem, you do not need to say Malchut in order for you to get credit. Why not? He says, the Tanya, we have a Braita. The Braita talks about when a person there's a system of Masrot. You have the 7 years, 6 years, then you come to Shemitah. So there's an order of what you take off the first year and the second year, Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni, the first year of the 6 years, and the second year, Maser Rishon, Maser Sheni, and the third year is Maser Rishon and Maser Ani. Then you repeat that cycle. What you did the first year, you do the fourth year. What you did the second year, do the fifth year. What you did the third year, do the sixth year. That's the cycle. And the third year of the cycle, every 3 years, you go ahead and you make a declaration where you go to the Beit HaMikdash and you make a confession and you make a statement and you say that you've done your job, you've taken off your masrot, you've done what you're supposed to do, and you treated it properly the way you're supposed to treat them with the holiness, whatever needed, certain things are holy. So what do you make a declaration? What's the declaration? Lo of the Tanya wanted to write the lo avarti mitzvotecha. You say, I did not transgress, I did not from doing your mitzvot, I followed your mitzvot. V'lo shachachti, I did not forget. What is that referring to? What does it mean? I did not transgress your mitzvot, and I also did not forget. Doesn't it seem repetitive? And I did not forget. What's the double language? Mike, good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We have Albert Franco sitting in on the class, Morris, by the Mike.
Amazing. Welcome, Albert.
Okay. So the Gemara says, Lo avarti. What does it mean, Lo avarti? The Gemara now is dissecting the Braita, is dissecting the meaning of this pasuk. Lo avarti milavarechacha. I did not violate from giving you saying the bracha. There's a special bracha that you're supposed to say when you do the mitzvahs of Maaseh. Before you separate the truma and before you separate the Maaseh, you say a bracha. What's the bracha? Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahafrish truma Maaseh. The bracha is that Hashem commanded us to separate truma and Maaseh, and generally before you do the act, you do the bracha. Like before you put the mezuzah, you fix the mezuzah, you say the bracha, then you put the mezuzah onto the doorpost. So too, you say the bracha before you go ahead and separate the truma and the Maaseh. Just like the woman, when she takes off challah, she says the bracha, and then she separates the what? The challah. Now, we all know that brachot, brachat ha-mitzvah, a bracha before you perform a mitzvah, is generally, we say, is the Rabbanan, right? What bracha is min Torah? The bracha that's min Torah is a bracha, birkat ha-mazon is the bracha that everybody agrees is min Torah. There's one other bracha that some say is min Torah, is birkat ha-Torah. It's a machloket. It's saying a bracha before you learn every day. When you say the bracha, the Strong say al divrei Torah, the Ashkenaz say la'asok b'divrei Torah, asher bach rabbanan mikol amim. Is that a biblical obligation to say that bracha every day? Because that's a bracha that you say before you learn, or that's a rabbinic obligation? That's a machloket. But a bracha before you perform a mitzvah, the bracha before you tie your tefillin, that's a rabbinic. Everybody agrees that's rabbinic. And rabbinic, we do rabbinics too, by the way. But it's rabbinic. It's good to know. Rabbanan deraita. So yet the Gemara is saying that the pasuk, when it's talking about separating the trumot and the masrot, lo avarti mitzvosecha means I've said the bracha. I'm making a declaration. I have done the bracha. But I thought there's no such thing, Rabbi. You just told me that the Torah is on a Torah level. And how could the pasuk be telling us that a person is declaring I said the bracha if the requirement to say the bracha is rabbinic? If the whole requirement came later on, how could we say that the pasuk, when the pasuk says that the person is making a statement, one thing that he's saying is I said the bracha that I needed to say, but there's no institution of the bracha yet, because the institution of bracha before you celebrate the Truma Masaf came much later. So the Slach, good morning, how are you, Sammy? So the Slach says, this is the Slach says that this is something, sometimes the Gemara has a drasha, but it means it's like an asmachta. It means it's like the Gemara sometimes finds when the rabbis institute certain things, they see it hinted to in the Torah. Even though the Torah is not referring to this specifically. The Torah is not referring to lo avati mitzvosecha, does not refer to I did not hold back from saying the bracha. That's not what the pasuk literally means. But it's open, it's written in that way that you could see to fit in this idea of saying a bracha before you go ahead and separate the trumot and the masrot. That's one idea. However, the Shita Mugabetze says a different interpretation. He says it's referring to which bracha are we referring to? I've said Birkat HaMazon. When I eat, when I have bread, I say that's what the person is declaring, and that's a biblical mitzvah. So lo avarti mitzvosecha, I did not refrain from blessing you, from giving the bracha. What type of bracha? Not before I separated the masrot, that how Rashi learns. Rather, I did not hold back from giving you the bracha whenever I ate. Whenever I ate, I had a good meal. I was careful to always say Birkat HaMazon. You hear that, Mike? That's the declaration. By the way, it's a little musar. You know, there are some people that have a Friday night meal. Before they say Birkat HaMazon, they get onto the couch, and before you know it, it's 2:00 in the morning. They forgot to say Birkat HaMazon. My father, Alav HaShalom, says, don't leave the table until you say Birkat HaMazon. Don't leave the table. That's what he told us kids growing up. Don't leave the table, because you might lose out. You might miss out on the Birkat HaMazon. So we see how powerful Berachos HaMazon is. According to Shita Mukabet says that there's even a declaration from the person. He's declaring, I've done those brachot. I followed the brachot. Yes, good morning, Akiva. Yes, Morris.
Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning, everyone. Hey, Mike.
Great. Mike, good, very good, excellent. Because Mayim Achronim is not really a bracha. Mayim Achronim, I know the Sfardim they follow the opinion of Shulchan Aruch. Mayim Achronim chovah. It's an obligation, it's a mitzvah. Now you're asking a question, maybe why don't we make a bracha on that mitzvah? That's a great. That's a good question. Why did they make an obligation? Why did they say a bracha on the Mayim Achronim before you do Mayim Achronim? But it could be because the Mayim Achronim is really for the Birkat HaMazon, and so you're saying the same way they made it instant. We say you wash your hands, and before you wash your hands for bread, you say a bracha natil yadayim. So Morris is asking a good question. Why did the rabbis institute a bracha for Mayim Achronim? Before you do Mayim Achronim, if you want, you could say that question. Perhaps I would answer you the following: before you wash your hands for bread, we know one of the reasons why there's different reasons given why you say a bracha before you wash your hands for bread. Not necessarily are your hands dirty. It's not because definitely your hands are dirty, or the main reason is because your hands are dirty. That's one reason why they instituted the bracha. But there's other reasons, because of the truma, because we wanted to make sure, because the kohanim have to wash their hands before they eat truma. to make sure that the hands, that they're not tamei, the hands aren't tamei. So because of that, we're looking forward that the Beit HaMikdash should be rebuilt soon, that we got to be in the habit of washing our hands before we eat bread. So they made it that everybody washes their hands before they eat bread. But for Mayim Achronim, the real reason for Mayim Achronim, the main reason is because your hands are, we want your hands to be clean. Maybe you have, maybe melech sodomit, maybe you have salt from Sodom on your hands. Maybe your hands are dirty, and therefore you shouldn't say Birkat HaMazon in such a state. So because of that, being that one of the main reason is your hands are actually, it's common that your hands are dirty at the end of a meal, and we don't say a bracha when our hands are dirty. So maybe they didn't want to, maybe that could be why they didn't institute a bracha in such a situation when you know that your hands are already dirty, perhaps. Maybe, and then you could say, so why don't they wash their hands and then say the bracha like for before, that far maybe they didn't go. But it's a good question. Okay, let's continue in the Gemara. The Gemara says the following. What does it mean? I did not forget. I did not forget to mention your name, Hashem, when I said the bracha. When I said the bracha, let's say if we'll learn how Rashi learns Pshat, that is referring to the bracha when you before you separate the maaser. I did not forget to mention your name. I mentioned your name. So what is the Braita say? The key that the Braita focuses on is the mentioning of Hashem's name. It didn't say, and I did not forget to mention your name and your kingship and your malchut. The ilu malchut lo ketani. The Braita did not emphasize the idea of malchut, that I did not mention, that I also remembered to mention the malchut. So therefore the Gemara wants to say, Rabbaye was a later Amora, wants to say that Rav's opinion seems to be the main opinion, that you don't need to say Malchut. That's what Rav says. That's what Abaye says. However, Rabbi Yochanan, who says you must mention Malchut, what is he going to say? He's going to say, Tani, Lo shachachti, he would learn in the Braita, he would amend the language of the Braita. He has the reading the following. Lo shachachti, I did not forget, milahaskir shimcha, for mentioning your name, umalchutcha alav. Your name, not only does the Braita have the text of your name, and also your malchut, your name and your kingship. It's not enough to say God's name. You have to talk about what God represents, that he's the king of the world. And therefore, that's how he has it in his text, that that's what the person said. I did not
Rabbi,
forget to mention, yes.
so you would be Yotzei if you've mentioned the kingship and Hashem's name and say thank you when you eat, without saying from the Gemara, without saying the whole Birkat Hamazon, you would be Yotzei.
If from the Gemara, at least for the first bracha of the Birkat Hamazon, which the first bracha is just thanking Hashem that he nourishes. The focus of the bracha, the theme of the first bracha is that you thank Hashem for bringing nourishment for the food. That's the bracha, that's the essence of the first bracha. So if you will say a one-liner, Mike, if you'll say, as the Shulchan Aruch says, if you say, Brich Rachmana, here he says, Brich Rachmana, blessed be the merciful one, which is referring to God. Malka, who is the king. So you have Hashem's name by saying Rachmana. A kinui, a nickname for Hashem will do it. Meaning we see not just saying Hashem's action, like Hashem, just saying Rachmana, the merciful one. Brich Rachmana, Malka, the king. Morei, the high pita. 6 words, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 words. You say that he's the Morei, he's the master of the high, that he's the one who created, the master of that bread, high pita. You recognize that God is the one who's the Morei, the high pita. He's the one behind the bread. He's the one who gave you nourishment. 6 words, you got it. And therefore, there are some that say you would train your child before he's capable of doing the full Birkat Hamazon, and not only hits your child, boy or a girl, because we know women are obligated in Birkat Hamazon too. The only question we had in the Gemara early in Berachos, we have a Baki, Albert is a Baki in Berachos, is whether they're obligated Minat Torah or D'Rabbanan is the question regarding women, right? Everyone got to make sure their wives are saying Birkat Hamazon. There's no question she has to say Birkat Hamazon in the Gemara. There's only one question: is her obligation Minat Torah? Is the woman's obligation D'Rabbanan, right, Ben? And whether she could say Birkat Hamazon for a man or she can't say it, because we don't know if she's obligated Minat Torah or not. She can't say the Birkat Hamazon for a man, but she's obligated. Yes. I mean, you have is there a short version? So that's all based on our Gemara. Most probably, I would bet that the woman's short version of Birkat Hamazon is based on the fact that they were concerned that the woman would not be able, might not have been educated so much to say the full Birkat Hamazon. And sometimes if you don't give them a mini version, they won't do anything. They won't know it. So perhaps that's where that mini version. I know the Yalkut Yosef discusses. Maybe we could see what he says. And I remember him saying something about the mini version. We'll see about it. But Ben, you hear what I'm saying? I would say the way the ladies today who went to Jewish schools and are educated, they should what say? That some of them are, and therefore they should say the full Birkat Hamazon. The only thing I would say, Ben, if it's a question of whether she's going to say the Birkat Hamazon or not, and the only way she'll say it if you give her the short version, then I would say give her the short version, then better than not saying at all. But I would definitely believe that she should say the regular full version. Yes, Albert. Oh. So you see here, Albert asked an amazing question that Tosfos asked this question. He's on target with Tosfos. That Tosfos, I'm going to do the Tosfos right now. That the first bracha of the Amidah, how does it begin? Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoteinu. Elokei Avraham, Elokei Yitzchak, Elokei Yaakov. So it has Hashem's name, but what are we missing? We're missing Malchut, right? We don't say Melech HaOlam. Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoteinu. We happen to Melech. So are you going to tell me that the halacha is like the other rabbi that says you don't need to say Melech? Are we of that impression? First of all, we need to identify what is the halacha.
Since we say Avat, Rabbi, since we say the Avat, it's taking everything together.
So Mike knows. Mike has Tosfos answer. That what did you say, Morris? You hear what he said? Like you said, the Avot are the Malchut of Hashem, because how are they there? Abraham is the one that brought the knowledge of God to the whole world. That Avram was the one to Vayikra b'Shem Hashem. He called out in the name of Hashem. He told the world there's a God. He was the one also he used the medium of food. As you remember the Midrash, a guy will go in and eat. And after the guy would go in and eat, Avram would say, you know what? You should bless the one. You should recognize the one and give a blessing to the one who created the food. He was the one who told them after they ate to say bracha. Look at the Tosfot, everybody, to address Albert's question and your answers. Amar Abaye, you have the Tosfot, the right side, the Tosfot. Amar Abaye, Kavatei, the Rav Stavra. You have it? Amar Abaye, you have the Tosfot? Everyone have it? Ben, you got the Tosfot? Mem on the base. Morris, you got it? Mike? Yesh Mefarshim. Some say the Mistavra Brata Kavate. Now there's another text over here. I see another text over here. What do they say? Yes, some say the Hilchata Kirav. Some say that the halacha follows Rav, that you do not need to say Malchut. The Mistavra Braita Kavate, because the Braita is leaning more, the simple reading of the Braita seems to imply, like Rav, that you just have to mention Hashem's name in a bracha. You don't need to go ahead and say Malchut. That's some commentaries of that opinion in the halacha. However, Umihu, Tosfos says, Rav Alfis, that's the Rif, of Yitzchak Alfasi, Posa Kerab Yochanan. He has the more stricter opinion. He says you also need to say Malchut. And it's not good enough to say Hashem's name. Baruch atah Hashem, it's not good enough. You have to say Malchut, Melech. V'chein Pasak Ri. And the Ri, another one of the Rishonim, the Chol Bracha she'ein bo Malchut Shemayim Eino Bracha.
Rabbi,
Any bracha. Yes.
which answer Tosfot, which point Tosfot is commenting now? When we say the bracha, do we say Malchut, or what do we need to say in the bracha to be Yotzei?
Right, right, very good. The headline is always important when we do a Tosfot. It's always important to focus in on the headline of the Tosfot. The headline of the Tosfot was Amma Abaye Kavotei de Ram Mistavra. The headline was Tosfos is making his comment on that part of the Gemara. Abaye said, Abaye, one of the later Amoraim, he said that it seems to be that the opinion of Rav seems to be the more logical opinion. That is what the statement of Abaye says, which would mean the headline of Tosfot, good morning Shmuel, is that
Boker Tov.
Boker Tov, good to see you. He's commenting, he's saying that the opinion of Rav, the Abaye says Rav's opinion, you don't need to say Malchut, is more logical. And Tosfos says, by the way, that's how many commentaries go with that opinion. Because Abaye said Rav's opinion is more logical, and therefore many poskim say, if that's what Abaye says, we'll go like Abaye.
So Abaye's opinion is to mention or to not mention Malchut?
You don't need to. You don't need to say Malchut according to Abaye. Now, it could, remember, there's always, good morning, there's always the Lachatchila and there's the B'diavad, meaning Abaye, everybody agrees that, I would say that everybody would agree that you maybe you should mention it, but maybe that's what I would think, but maybe if you don't mention it, whether you get credit or not. So Rav Abaye is saying that you do not need, technically you don't need to mention it. If you didn't mention it, you definitely would get credit. That's what Abaye would say. Have a great day, great Shabbat. Thank you for being here. So the Gemara says, however, Tosfos says, by the way, you should know that many Rishonim say no, that you have to say Malchut. And that's what Tosfos is commenting on. And then Tosfos says, Tosfos continues, Mike. If you skip the Malchut of a bracha, of Birkat HaMotzi, if you skip Malchut, you didn't say the word Melech, you skip the word Melech, you have to go ahead and repeat the bracha. First said Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu and then the Olam. Skip the word Melech. He says, "Vafilu davak dalag tevat ha'olam bilvad." Even if he skipped the word ha'olam, he just said Melech, that God is a king. There's a lot of kings in the world. There's a what? Gotta be very careful. There's a king of Saudi Arabia, there's a king of Jordan, what? Right.
Morocco.
Morocco. So we have to say Melech Ha'olam, the king of the world. It's not really showing kingship of Hashem, doesn't really show the great, he's the king. Okay, he's the king. So you skip Melech Malchut. The Melech, the Tosfos says, the Melech Levad Eino Malchut. The word king by itself is not enough of Malchut showing real ruleship. Now, Berachos Shmona Esrei, the Berachos Shmona Esrei ain't behem Malchut. They do not, if you look at the middle brachot of the Shmona Esrei, really even the first bracha, but let's talk about from bracha number 2 to bracha number 219. The Eino Bon B'Sicha Ubechasima Eino Shayach Malchut. So Tosfos says, if you look at the second bracha of the Amidah, where does the second bracha of the Amidah begin? Ata gibor l'olam Hashem. That begins the second bracha. And where does it end? Baruch atah Hashem mechayei hametim. So Tosfos says, since that bracha does not open and close with a baruch, it opens with Ata gibor l'olam Hashem. The third bracha opens up Ata kadosh shivcha kadosh. Since it doesn't open up in the format of a with a Baruch Atah Hashem, that does not need Malchut. Malchut, it's considered a bracha, so it's a new chidush. You can have a bracha. It doesn't require Malchut because it's not opening. It's because it's not the normal opening of a bracha. Now we have to see. So why not? The fact. So, but we'll try to address that in a moment. But he says, let's move to the side. Let's move away from the middle bracha because it's not the normal style bracha, right? What's a normal style of a bracha? It opens with a baruch. This does not open with a baruch. Therefore, it's not. Therefore, the laws of the malchut. It doesn't. Not only does it not have malchut, it doesn't have baruch. Doesn't meaning it's not even the normal. It's not the normal style of the bracha. And one of the reasons is because the middle brachot are all connected to the first bracha. They're all called bracha hasmucha lechaverta. Bracha number 2 is riding on the coattails of bracha number 1. Bracha number 1 opens up with the Baruch Atah Hashem, so that covers bracha 2, 3, 4. When you have a group of brachot and they're all connected. Therefore, they all the following brachot do not need to start with the traditional Baruch Atah Hashem because they're riding on the first bracha. And that's why Birkat HaMazon, the second bracha and the third bracha don't begin with the Baruch. No Delacha and Rachem don't begin with a Baruch. They're riding on the first bracha. But the fourth bracha opened with the Baruch because it was a later instituted bracha. Okay, so Tosfos continues. Tosfos says, Aval Elokei Avraham Have kemo malchut. When you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu v'Elokei Avoteinu Elokei Avraham, that's as if you said malchut, like you said before. The Avraham Avinu himlich HaKadosh Baruch Hu al kol ha'olam. Avram Avinu was the one who made God known throughout the world. Shehodia malchuto. He made known his malchut. So that's the answer Tosfos says for why we do not need to mention malchut in the Shemona Esrei when you say the first bracha, because we are mentioning it. It's like they say, there's many ways to skin a cat. There's many ways to say malchut. And Tosfos is going to prove also later on, one of the psukim on Rosh Hashanah that, on Rosh Hashanah, we say malchiot, zichronot, and shofrot. We have 10 psukim that we talk about malchut. And one of the psukim that we use for malchut is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It doesn't mention malchut. It doesn't say the word malchut in there. Right. But Tosfos is coming from a different aspect. He's not coming from there. It's not coming as brachot, but it's called psukim that are classified psukim of malchiot. Now, generally, the psukim that are brought there that are psukim malchiot contain the word melech in the pasuk. Yet, the Gemara brings the pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem. Yet, one of the psukim that we say to make the big 10 is Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. It doesn't mention malchut in that pasuk. The answer is when you say Shema Yisrael, when you say, "Hear Israel, Hashem is our God, Hashem is one," that is malchut. He's one and only. That is another way of saying malchut. That's another way of saying that God is the creator of the world. So therefore, it's not necessary to say the word malchut. The whole meaning of the bracha means malchut, and Tosfos says that's the same thing when it comes to the Amidah, when you say Avraham. We have to realize, maybe I would think, based on this Tosfot, there's a new kavanah that we should have when we say the bracha. Meaning, when we're saying the bracha, Elokeinu v'Elokei Avraham, I would think I think it would fit to think about this idea that Elokei Avraham, that means Malchut. I just said Malchut. How many people are thinking about Malchut when they're saying Elokei Avraham? I don't know. But I would think, based on the Tosfos, if this is serving as Malchut, so you should be thinking Malchut. What do you say? That's what I would say.
Rabbi,
Yes.
we can also say, since this is the bracha of Malchut that's carrying on for the whole Amidah, it sounds like you said, right?
Right.
So maybe that's why also a reason why they say you have to be very careful in the first bracha.
Interesting. Why you have that special kavanah in the first bracha of understanding what you're saying. Very good. What do you say? That's on Rosh Hashanah. We say Melech Kadosh, Melech HaMishpat. But I'm saying, but a Melech, we say Hakel Kadosh. It's called Gevurot Geshamim, but it's not Atagib Olam Hashem. It doesn't say, but it's a good question. Is that also kingship? Good question. Malchut. What is the Shulchan Aruch? How does the Shulchan Aruch pass? Can we have Tosfot? Different opinion of Tosfot. Kol bracha she'ein bo, the Shulchan Aruch says, if you do not mention Hashem's name and Malchut, he goes like the Rif. You need to mention Melech, it's not a bracha. And he's, what do you say? Like Rabbi Yochanan. And if you skipped Shem u'Malchut, and by the way, I mean, there's another rule that Tosa said earlier, when you have a machlukas Rav Rabbi Yochanan, the law follows Rabbi Yochanan. And this machluket over here now, Gemara, is also between Rav and Rabbi Yochanan. So it makes sense that the law should follow Rabbi Yochanan. And Tosa says, and then the Shulchan Aruch says, even if you skip the word Ha'olam, like Tosa says, you said Hashem, you said Melech, but you skipped the word Ha'olam, you have to go back. That's how the Shulchan Aruch paskins. It would seem like all brachot. The Chafetz Chaim brings down that there is opinions that disagree on the Ha'olam that Tosfot says. That the Shulchan Aruch goes with Tosfot. There are those that say if you skip the word Ha'olam, you would not have to go back, repeat the bracha. So that's there seems to be a question regarding that. Before we saw, let's see if we could find, if in the Alkut Yosef, if we could find very fast where he talks about, maybe we'll look at it at a different time. Let's see about the short version of, let's see if we can find it fast. Let's see. Oh, here he goes. Yalkut Yosef. Simon, what he was talking about, Ben was talking about. Simon Kuf Pei Vav. He says the women should not use the short version. They should not use the short version that's in the Sidurim. They should bench the proper nusach. That's what he says. And he says the women that are very busy taking care of the kids, if they want to skip from the harachamans, that they have a right. They're exempt from saying the nusach harachaman. Okay, so you see that he's definitely encouraging the women to do the regular Birkat Hamazon. Let's not give any women any shortcuts over here on this. But he does say we wanted to take care of the kids, and if they feel if they want to stop from the harachamans, they can stop at the harachamans, up to the harachamans. Okay, let's see the Mishnah. New Mishnah on Mem Amid Beis, 40b. Al dava she'in gedulo min haaretz. Something that does not grow from the ground. Let's say fish, meat, right? Things that don't grow from the ground. Omer sha'akol niyeh bidvaro. You go ahead and you say sha'akol niyeh bidvaro. That's the proper bracha. Meaning, something that grows from the ground, you say Borei Pri Adama. Something that grows from the tree, you say Borei Pri Eitz. But something that doesn't grow from the ground, it doesn't grow from the tree. Again, also, we said other brachas, we have other brachas too. But what is the bracha for those items that don't grow from the tree, don't grow from the ground, and that don't grow from this type of things? You say a shahako. Now, ala chometz. Now, what do you say?
I'm sorry, Rob. One exception, I think, that I found it interesting is the mushrooms.
Yes. Mushrooms, because they get the nourishment not from the ground. Therefore, they don't make the nourishment is from the air or from wherever they get the nourishment from. Therefore, they do not say hadama. Very good. Exactly right. I think we're gonna get to the mushrooms. Stay tuned. I think the Gemara will be talking about the mushrooms. They're coming up. They're on the menu, Shmuel. They're coming up. So the Gemara is ala chometz. A person has wine that became vinegar. The wine spoiled. What's the bracha for the wine that's spoiled? The bracha is, and people, we're talking about that people do still benefit from it. They have some benefit from it. It's not that it's damaging, because we know anything that damages, you will not, if you have no enjoyment from it, you won't have no benefit, you will not make a bracha. So it's ala chometz, on the vinegar, on the wine that's spoiled, you say a shahakol, ala novlot. If novlot is referring to, we're going to see, but we'll go one translation we'll give for now, is fruits that the heat of the sun really beat down on them. And as a result of that, the fruit, got diminished a certain amount. As a result of that, it withered a certain amount. How do they translate, Morris? How do they translate the Mishnah? If you look at the Mishnah, al hanovlot, do they give a translation in the Mishnah for novlot? Right. So it's fruit. It's fruit. It's fruit. It's fruit that the sun came down. That they came down on. That came down very hot on. We're going to see in the Gemara. Good morning, Aaron. We're going to see in the Gemara different interpretations of what that is. I'll tell you how they want to translate this fruit. They don't even want to translate it. They call it novlot. Right? Dates that have been altered. Right. The Gemara will talk about. Meanwhile, we're going to say that the sun, Morris, beat down on these fruits, and therefore, as a result of that, the fruits got all shriveled up. They started shrinking as a result of the sun on it. Ananovlot valagavai. Gavai is locusts that are kosher. There are certain locusts that are kosher, and also, in order for you to know which locusts are kosher, you need to have a proper tradition to know which locusts are kosher. I remember that maybe the Orach Chaim HaKadosh or one of the rabbis wrote about a certain locust, that people think is kosher, but if they don't have a tradition on it, they're not allowed to eat that locust. You have to be very careful to know. I can't tell you today which locusts are kosher. Maybe Aaron could tell us, but I can't tell you which locust. He went to Cooper Union College for some reason, to know about which locusts, he's engineering and and the locusts are now. What's the bracha on the locusts that are tahar, that are kosher locusts? So he says, Omer shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Rabbi Yehuda argues. He says no. Kol shehu min klala, something that's a min klala, something like connected with a curse, because the locusts go ahead and they devour crops. He says the Chachamim never instituted a bracha on the locusts, and some will say similarly on the vinegar if it turns sour. that means it was it's bad. It had something bad happened to it because it turned sour, or the fruits that it got beaten on from the sun. It was altered in a bad way, so it got ruined in a certain way. It's edible, but he says you would not make a bracha. We'll see more about that. We'll just conclude the Mishnah. That's a machlokas whether you should make a bracha on these locusts or these or the vinegar. You have many different types of fruits and foods in front of you. Which one do you make the bracha? I have apples, oranges, and grapes. Who do I say the bracha on? If you have one of the species that Eretz Yisrael is known for, I have grapes. I have apples, oranges. Make the bracha, say the Borah Creates on the grapes, and have in mind to cover the rest, because the grapes are from the Shivas Aminim. However, Chachamim says, Mevarech al Eize mehem sheyitzeh. Which one do you like better? Do you like apples more than grapes? If you like apples more than grapes, they say you make the bracha on the apples, not the grapes. And that's the machloket, whether you make on the one that came from the species of Eretz Yisrael, or the one that you like more. Well, to be continued, it'll be beautiful Gemaras coming up. Have beautiful Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. We'll be on 10 o'clock on Sunday morning, Be'ezat Hashem. And have a beautiful Shabbat Shalom. Everything good.
Thank you,
Shalom.
Rabbi. Beautiful. Shabbat Shalom Mevorach. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Thank you. See you.
להתראות.
By the way, bye-bye. Yeah, have a great Shabbat Shalom. The share is always better than when there are more people there. So we had a special guest today, so that hopefully because of him, you have to thank him that the class was a better class.
Amen.
I believe the class depends on the people. You know, they say that it says that, you know, the leaders are according to the people. You have good people, you have good leaders. You have people that are not so good. The leader represents the people. I believe the class of the rabbi is dependent how great the people that are there. Shabbat Shalom.
And the
everybody.
greater Rabbi.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All the best,
All right,
everybody.
thank you. Good Shabbos.
Yes.
Hi, Shmuel.
Come on. It's so happy to see you guys together. You too. Take care. Goodbye.